All right, good morning. It is Thursday, May 8th, 2025. Rob Browne, Brendan Martin, iced coffee. I've got mine in a Bim Bam cup. Get down to Oxford, Mississippi. Got an unbelievable big breakfast going on right now. Burgers, awesome food, wings.
Burgers?
They Bim Bam burgers and breakfast in Oxford, Mississippi.
Wow.
And that is an awesome place. Hey, lot to do today. Take out your cellular, take a picture of the QR code for us here on X, Twitter, and YouTube. Brendan, tell you about the channel. It is becoming the channel, the SEC Sidelines Sports Network. It is growing, top-notch content by the best in the business.
Best in the business.
Yeah, we don't hold back.
We don't know what we're doing, but we're getting all the band back together. Tons of podcasts and things that we're talking about. All you got to do is click on the QR code down there. Follow us on YouTube. You'll get a notification when we're live. But you can go out, watch it later, listen to it later, however you want. It'll be on X. It'll be on Facebook at Sidelines. There's all sorts of ways for you guys to get involved and listen to the best content. All you got to do is a one-stop shop. You don't have to go anywhere else. You get it all right here, all day long. 2, 3, sometimes 4 shows a day. All
live content too. And if there's breaking circumstances, Brendan alerts us. Alert.
I never leave the studio. I stay here all day.
He's like a bat. I mean, this is unbelievable.
Bat.
7 monitors going. And look, thank you, everybody. Type in your questions and comments. We love those. I promise you we'll do our best to address them, to answer them, shed light on them. We've got a great one today. Coach Matt Dean at Rhodes College in Memphis, John Hartwell, AD at ULM, and Gary Harris in Tuscaloosa will join us in the second half of the hour. It's a full 60 minutes, pal. We want to leave you always wanting more. And again, stayed up last night, guys, till about 1 something over here. Came over to the farm. MJ is cooking for a couple of hundred people. Big barn conference downtown Memphis on Front Street with Felicia Suzanne, one of the best chefs on the planet. So I'm watching him cooking all the brisket and the shoulders, and it's interesting. Blue, you want low and blue, 225 and blue. That's what you want when you're cooking brisket, when you're cooking barbecue. And they're going to have all these people from New York coming down here, and what they will say is, we don't get barbecue.
New York.
Yeah, New York.
Get a rope.
That's right.
Let's say hi. Let's say hi, John, and let's say hi, Matt.
John Hartwell, Matt Dean, and
there you go.
Matt, guys, I'm excited.
Thanks, guys.
Rob's a little excited this morning.
I'm fired up. Guys, I want to get the first strikeout here, the first pitch from the mound. Want to start with Tony Barnhart was on here with us yesterday. Great conversation. Again, the game is just getting better and better. There's some stuff going on off the field. And I'll start with you, John, and then Matt. All the stuff going on off the field, there's got to be some solutions and things that are being worked on that we're not hearing about that you can tell us about. So, John, let's go. How are we going to save college football, college athletics?
Yeah, I don't know if it's saving it, but there are a lot of people trying to tweak it right now. I mean, hot off the press late last night. It looks like the first 2 folks appointed to this special collegiate sports commission that President Trump is doing are none other than 2 guys who used to be opponents, Tommy Tuberville and Nick Saban, which has some irony in it, in and of itself. But I will say this, I think that's part of what has happened in the past is we've had folks who, for lack of a better term, were not practitioners trying to make decisions that impact what happens in college athletics. And so I'm hoping that there's some progress there. 2 other fronts happening, and I'll just read this so that I'll get it right. An updated filing made Wednesday in the House settlement case around roster limits will see schools be, quote, permitted to grandfather in a range of athletes. 1, those currently on a roster. 2, those athletes who have already been cut this year. And 3, those high school recruits who enrolled at a school after committing to a roster position only to see it eliminated, end quote. The revision, again, in quotes, is not mandatory, but is at each school's discretion, end quote. So what does all of that jargon mean?
Yeah.
It means there's probably not going to be the roster limits for the coming 12 months. In some respects, are going to be just like they were before. I mean, they're not necessarily roster limits, although there are some in terms of who dresses out and things like that. Now, if that is what the final resolution is, it'll be interesting. But again, when you've got, and this is not just Group of 5 schools, this is Power 4 schools too, because you have some Power 4 schools who have committed, the roughly $21 million in revenue share, who have had to cut in other places just to be able to financially make that happen. Now, there are 35 or 40 schools who that really doesn't apply to, but the other 25, it does apply to. So it's going to be interesting because some people are just going to be able to bankroll this and put those folks on scholarship, but others may have to just stick to the plan prior to these updated amendments to the House settlement.
Well, Claudia Wilkin, again, the eyes of the sports world are on her. Coach Matt Dean, kind of take on what John just said. It's new stuff.
Well, and I'll also add, guys, it's good to be on the round table here. Athletes are wanting to stay longer because they're getting paid.
Yeah.
And Gary Harris has been on here the last 2 times with us and really attacked it well about the length of eligibility and what's going on with some of these extensions and appeals. So I do think, from my perspective, the athletes stay longer, they get a couple extra degrees, and then they know that some of these guys are not going to get drafted. So why wouldn't you want to get paid? That's ultimately, if you want to be a pro football player, they're getting paid in college now. So it's created a situation where not only do we have to learn how to fix it, maybe from a capology side of things, but what's the true eligibility norm? What are we looking at? And another piece of this, revenue versus Olympic sports. At some point, we have to make a bold statement and basically say, if a gymnast, and there's some great ones in LSU that are making a lot of money on NIL, can go out and get NIL the true way it was designed, fantastic. But if your sport is not a revenue-producing sport, okay, do they need a cut of the pie, John? But then again, that's when the lawsuits are going to come in if we ever make that distinction, I think, because then we're going to face some backlash in equity in Title IX. Your thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, I mean, Title IX is kind of the what's behind door number 3,
right?
That a lot of people are not talking about right now. They're saying, "Hey, this is all driven off of broadcast and television rights revenue, and where the revenue is, and this is no secret. Roughly 80% of the revenue doled out by ESPN or CBS or Fox or whoever." Is allocated toward, the value is in college football,
right?
Or the brunt of it, and then men's basketball, and then you get the trickle down effect of women's basketball, a little bit of baseball, and you could argue there's a fraction in the SEC and a couple other leagues for gymnastics, but it's there's still a lot up in the air, but. The third prong that I forgot to talk about, I talked a little bit about the Presidential Commission. I talked about the latest on the House settlement. But the other thing that is percolating out there is as it relates to Division I athletics governance. And there is somewhat of a power play to make the Power 4 leagues even more powerful in terms of future governance as it relates to the NCAA. And that's not all bad. From somebody at the Group of 5 level, that's not all bad. It's probably going to eliminate some of the bureaucracy, but it is going back to the version B of the golden rule, those who have the gold rule. So stay tuned on that as well. But there's so many offshoots. I see one of the questions from Rob Anderson, John, will any of these rules apply in Louisiana? Asking for a friend. Here's the thing that's going on in our state right now. A couple of pieces of legislation. Let me just give 3 real quick. that are going on. One, there's a battle back and forth about the taxability of NIL to student athletes. I know in the state of Arkansas, it just passed where NIL funds or revenue is not taxable in the state. I know that's reaching a little or having a little more opposition in the state of Louisiana. And one of the biggest arguments is, well, if a 20-year-old who's on a scholarship, who's getting everything paid for and is getting $200,000, why wouldn't that be taxable? And, Jane Doe, from Mandeville, who's a school teacher and has 3 kids and is making $45,000 as a school teacher, why would we tax that and not tax that? So that's one thing. We've got some sports wagering dollars on the tax on sports wagering coming in. That's going to be a huge thing. But the other thing that's going on right now, and this is not an inconsequential byproduct, you've got a lawsuit right now, or excuse me, not lawsuit, legislation, a Senate bill out there that says, hey, no more than 25% of athletic scholarships at any state institution in Louisiana can go to international student athletes. Now, you may say, well, gosh, there aren't 25% of your student athletes who are international.
Yeah.
Think again. Some places where you've got an entire men's and women's tennis team, golf teams, soccer, track and field, that becomes an issue some places. So there are so many moving parts right now.
Well, I mean, that is a great point because the number of international students, what do you have, 582,000 NCAA student athletes, D1, 2, and 3? That's a lot of people. I think the Marine Corps total is 172,000. That's not counting reserves. There's a lot of people that are student athletes, and they're out there. They're coming out into the real world. I want to show y'all. I'm looking here at what we're seeing in college football. With all this NIL, there's questions like, hey, does that mean that everybody's going to be on an equal footing, because anybody can spend money? Well, Andy Staples, top 25, you can call it. It's not a way too early because that's always the night of the national championship game in January. But he's got Texas, Notre Dame, Clemson, Penn State, and Ohio State. Doesn't sound like any new blood there. The next 5, Oregon, Alabama, Georgia, Illinois, and Florida. Illinois, kind of new to the party. Red Grange, Dick Butkus, they were pretty good back before TV. But they were great players. Texas Tech. Now, that's a school, John and Matt and Brendan. People better pay attention. They got a great engineering program out in Lubbock. There's more cotton grown in America from Altus, Oklahoma to Lubbock, Texas than anywhere else. The only other place in the world where they grow more cotton, and that's a lot of money, is in the Yangtze River in China. There's a big engineering school. Texas Tech has got money, and they are getting serious about NIL. Number 12, South Carolina. 13, Auburn. 14, SMU. They rang the bell last year at SMU. 7 days, $151 million. LSU, 15. Yes. Arizona State. God, Kenny Dillingham. The job that guy, who is he, 34? That's Doogie Howser, isn't he? Just grown up. The guy's amazing. Michigan, for the second straight year, their coach will be suspended for a game or two. Brigham Young. By the way, guys, last year I read an article in a national publication that said of all the new schools coming into the Big 12, which school is least set up to do well? You know what it was? Brigham Young. Well, having sat behind a good Mormon who played his football at Alabama and was asked when he didn't sign with Brigham Young, why didn't you go to the mothership? There are about 16 million Mormons in the world, okay? Dr. Pepper can give you those stats, but they will give their last drop of blood to support the Cougars, okay? And mountain bike sales in that area are brisk, okay? Because everybody's got to ride one for 2 years on their Mormon mission. All right, Ole Miss 19, Miami 20, Tennessee 21, Nebraska 22. Here's a question. Saturday, when the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett, said he was stepping down as the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, his net worth $134 billion as he pulled in the same house he's lived in for 60 years in his 2017 Cadillac, and his wife drives a 15-year-old Ford Explorer. built to last. How much is he going to leave Nebraska? He's a big Huskers fan. 24 Iowa State, 25 Louisville, and 25 the Iowa Hawkeyes, who, by the way, a little bit of trivia here, folks. Top 20 college football programs with the most active NFL players in 2025. Iowa's tied for 16 with 34 guys in the NFL. That's pretty damn impressive. Look, I think what this is showing us, guys, what do you think? That we're seeing good football, at least projected, all around the country. I don't want to see the SEC and the Big Ten just run away and you got to get a telescope to find third place. Do y'all? I love seeing the game good. I want the SEC and my schools to win, but I want your school to do well. I want your school to do well. I want the Gators to do well. This show benefits from the SEC doing well. Anyone?
Hey, Matt, I just want to know how many of those 34 NFL guys are offensive and defensive linemen. Is that 31 or 32?
John, probably a high percentage, but you'd be surprised, John. There's some defensive backs out there. Phil Parker, the defensive coordinator at Iowa, is a long-time successful defensive coordinator, and he played the defensive back at Michigan State. And, there's a ton of guys in the NFL on the defensive side from Iowa. But you're right, John. The majority of them are on the line of scrimmage. And Tristan Wirfs from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is now I think one of the highest paid tackles in the league. Tyler Linderbaum, the center from the Baltimore Ravens, is another example. So people don't realize George Kittle, University of Iowa. Okay. I think he was a 4th round draft choice. So one of the things that's interesting about that list you just talked about, Rob, it just shows you how times change and how some things always stay the same. When I was growing up, Nebraska back in the 80s and early 90s was like the gold standard in the Midwest. Yeah. And then now you got them at I think 22. And they've made some strides. Matt Rule is moving the needle, but they're still nowhere near the elite and probably the playoff status. Another thing I'd just like to bring up, I know we're always talking about fixing this. So some of these people, you look at Texas Tech, they've got it figured out a little bit, and they're gonna hit gold here pretty soon because they've done really well on the men's basketball side. Yeah. And honestly, on the football side, I think they're pretty close. Over a course of 4-year cycle, when you start getting a money infusion and you start getting some people on both lines of the scrimmage and that quarterback, part of the reason Iowa's in the top 25, people think they have a quarterback finally. I'll be honest with you. So Mark Gronowski, who transferred from FCS school, South Dakota State, I believe. Yeah. He's going to be their starter, they think. They also got Hank Brown, I think that was at Auburn, Rob, transferred to Iowa. And then also a Wake Forest quarterback. So Iowa is in their collective trying to spend money at a position that historically the last 10 years has not been great for them.
Well, I mean, Hank Brown's a pretty good player from David Lipscomb, and I know Trent Dilfer coached him. Trent's pretty good coaching quarterbacks and not so good.
Better that than head coach, right?
Yeah, better that than as a head coach. I tell you what, man, I mean, he and Mildred ought to get together.
Hey, listen, no dice thrown there, no shade thrown, but I'm just saying.
No. But it just hadn't worked out really. But John, I got to ask you, okay, at ULM, if I'm an athletic director at ULM having to deal with NIL from Power 4 schools or whatever, I'm going to start looking at AA, AAA baseball, the farm systems. You look at farm systems of the Cardinals or the Yankees or the Braves. How are they successful year after year in drawing big crowds and getting players? If you are seen as a place to go and play for a year, 2-3 years, and you're going to get either paid more to stay, they're going to get you, you can really use that to your advantage. That's why at the same time, this is a diametrically opposing argument. I would be the first one to say I don't like that because I don't want the group of 5 to be viewed as a farm system for the Power 4 and the Power 2. So we gotta work this out.
I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. We've had a couple of men's basketball recruits on campus this week, a couple of really highly touted high school kids who, have been led along by some Power Four and some high level basketball teams.
Yeah.
But and this is happening all over the country. They've been strung along because a lot of these schools, they would rather invest in a proven transfer who has played at a high level before than the unknown of a high school kid. And so we've been fortunate enough with Phil Cunningham, our head coach, and his ties to have a couple of these kids on campus this week. And this this is not old school by any means, but this is, adapt or die.
Yeah.
And kind of our message is, hey, look at what happened to Ahmad Hardy, our running back. You could go to the SEC, you could go to the Big 12, but the likelihood is you are a 3-star, maybe a 4-star in some areas. The likelihood of you stepping in and playing significant minutes as a freshman is not very high. You're going to cut your teeth on the practice squad.
Yeah.
Would you rather have the opportunity to put up stats in the Sun Belt where you could probably come in and play significant minutes and probably start, and then be able to parlay that into, a Power 4 opportunity or a high level opportunity in another year or two? And I know there's probably some listeners out there and say, why in the hell would you do that? Well, we would do that because it gives us the best opportunity to compete this next year and hopefully for a couple of years with those kids, and utilizing that. And we have a track record, albeit in football, not men's basketball. But if people at our level don't do that, you're going to have trouble competing. And so we're looking at guys being able to go up. And then we've also got to be able to look at guys, that may have started out at that high level and for whatever reason they didn't get to play, and a bounce back opportunity to prove themselves.
Yeah. And you look, the talent, the future leaders of the Power Four and SEC and Big Ten, they're all out there, D3, D2, D1. Where did Commissioner Greg Sankey of the SEC Gulf South Conference was commissioner? I remember when Mike Slive, I have a friend in coaching who had to work with Mike Slive on a case. Mike Slive was an attorney, very successful in Chicago. And I remember when Mike Slive was the commissioner of Conference USA, and he would come down to Memphis, speak to the quarterback club. He was an unassuming, quiet, just very smart. When he spoke, you were like, holy shnikes, this guy really gets it. So there are smart people everywhere. John, you're at a group of 5 school. You're very smart, very cerebral. You get this stuff. I was thinking about it today. The first time you came on was August 31st of 2022 when y'all were in Tuscaloosa from Utah State at the time to play Alabama. You're up there in the press box at the ULM at Texas game in Austin. Athletic director Chris Del Conte, one of the best known in America, comes up to you and says, I see you're working your magic again at ULM. Here's a question from Gil Lawson. How young is too young for these high school football players start getting handlers or representatives? Can someone approach a 9th grader and start the nonsense? Let me just say that Sammy the Bull Gravano, we're going to get him on this. I think he's still alive. But you think about it. AAU basketball. In 7th and 8th grade, I remember when my kids were playing, suddenly you see these guys as tall as Matt and Brendan and John. By the way, I have the tallest panel of any show, I'll say, out there. 6'3", 6'7", 6'4". I'm 8'3". But you start seeing these guys with new shoes every week, and they're in 7th and 8th grade, and you're going, oh, yeah, like he's in 7th grade. What's he doing wearing my Harvard tie? Like he went to Harvard. Remember that Trading Places when Dan Aykroyd saw it? Yes. What do y'all think? But I think they're getting to him way before 9th grade. Agree?
Yeah, I think in some cases they are. Let me answer it as a parent first. I'd say, man, it's for your kid to be the optimum. If you want them to be a star, it's got to be for the fun of the game. They got to love what they're doing, and so it makes me cringe when I think about a handler for a 7th and 8th grader, but I know that it happens out there periodically. But again, we are not talking about the masses. We are talking about, just a few. But here's the problem. The handlers and representatives for these kids there is no regulation on them. And we've talked about this before. Anybody can call themselves an agent.
Yeah.
Unlike, registered sports agents for coaches or professional players, there are no education requirements. There are no certification requirements. So you really got to be careful what they're doing, and don't ever kid yourself for a second that the vast majority, I won't say all of them, but the vast majority of these handlers or agents are in it for personal fulfillment. They're not in it for the good of the kid.
Yeah. Well, we all remember the movie Live and Let Die with James Bond. Remember at the end of the movie when he wrecked the boat in the swamp and Sheriff JW came up there and James Bond was there and they said, "Now, JW, calm down now. He's a secret agent." And he goes, "On whose side?"
Where did you pull that from?
What drugs did you do today? Because you do an evening show and you are much different, much more like mellow.
Bim Bam Burgers and breakfast.
What is in the coffee? Because I want to sell it.
I don't know, but Matt.
Wow.
I got off track.
Here's something.
Where are you?
I was at an event, back in the coaching world. So I was at an event this weekend watching games, which is just an interesting ordeal. So everyone has a circle, right? And what John kind of alluded to, parenting still matters. The majority of these young men and women have the support group of their families that kind of avoid these situations. But there's just going to be always a special kid out there that someone sees and a situation where they may not have that family circle and they promise them stuff and it's going to happen. The regulations, like John said, there's not really a lot until you get to the higher level you can do about some of this stuff. But it's funny because when I was going between courts on Saturday and Friday, you just see the theatrics out there sometimes in the hallway with the parent and club coach dynamic, especially in the sport of basketball. There's nothing like basketball. And I'm back in the game. I'm excited to be back in the game, but that's the part of it that's really tricky because when you're vetting a player from a recruiting standpoint, and John, I thought about you guys for this because, one of my models as a basketball coach was I know I'm not going to get blue chips. I'm a non-scholarship, academic, highly selective, liberal arts, expensive school, right? So a lot of factors have to come in play before you come play for me. And first of all, I always have to sell education first, which is a beautiful thing for me for 34 years.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, like one of the niches I had is when I was recruiting young ladies that wanted to go pre-med, they were looking at smaller Division I schools, and I knew our placement rates for med schools were in the high 90s. Yeah. Aha, that's my sell. So I can get a player that's above our level because we are very superior from a certain niche academically. So that being said, sometimes I'm not going to get in that group maybe a shooter. So I have to be able to coach with those 2- and 3-star players in a system that's beneficial. And we always believed in the model that turnovers matter. 1 year, my teams led the nation in fewest turnovers a game. If you get 8 to 10 more possessions than someone, you don't have to shoot the ball as well to win basketball games. So there are ways to do it at every level. I think John just made a great hire on his men's basketball staff. So, but coaching matters, guys. And, it'd be nice to have Ohio State's budget in NIL, but I don't. So that's just the way it is. And life's not fair.
Well, I wanted to ask both you, Matt, and John this question. Over all these years, we've always heard of making grades, getting to class. That's sort of, that conversation has seemed to, gone away with NIL, transfer portal. It seems like we had this conversation last week about, academia could step up here and seemingly say, we got to make sure these kids pass their classes. We got to make sure these kids are going to school. It's not just online, and they're not just dialing in. It feels like to me, because over the years, I grew up in Colorado, where Boulder was very, post McCartney era was very vocal about how they were not a school about about athletics, and they were more about education and all that stuff. This is all before Prime got there, but it just seems like those voices are not around as much. Am I crazy?
No, you're right.
That's great. A great segue there, Brendan, because I was trying to look back at the actual data. I'll just kind of summarize this. So the APR results, the official APR results for last year for the 23-24 year just came out. Academic progress report. And there's been a lot of talk and concern about, and that's really calculated on a 4-year moving average. And I won't go too deep into it, but it deals with both eligibility of student athletes and retention of student athletes. Yeah. And, if they leave your place, are they leaving eligible?
Yeah.
And actually those numbers have, with the data released yesterday, and again, it's last year's numbers, show that it has remained pretty steady. Actually, in a couple of sports, I think football across all of Division I, it actually maybe went up a point. So, what the background of that is and how that happened, I'm not sure, because a lot of us thought you would start to see a dip, and maybe it's going to take another year, because again, it's a 4-year average. Yeah. But the results that came out yesterday were a little surprising that they remained steady.
All right, let me do this. Let me say something real quick about Winter Timber Outdoors. Gary Harris is going to jump in this conversation from Tuscaloosa. Winter Timber, folks, are located in Athens, Alabama. That's right up on the top of the state, right between Florence and Huntsville. They're open every day of the week. They're going to grow in the footprint that is the SEC. I tell you about them every day because they're really good. All your outdoor sports, your hunting, your fishing, they got everything you need. The St. Nick's knives, their firearms. They've got qualified employees that really know what they're doing. They won't sell you something to just sell you something. They'll sell you what fits right. Turkey season's about to wrap up. Turkey season, you got to have decoys. You got to have calls. Got to have snake boots. Got to get out there to the beach. Get out there to the lake, to the river. All the Yeti coolers, everything imaginable. Sitka gear, duck camp, Dixie decoys, shoes, boots, polos, Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee. That's there in the Tennessee Valley, man. Those are the big three up there. They got it all. And it's never too early to start getting ready for deer season with your food plots and your corn. And I'll say this about recruiting too. Wouldn't it make sense how many times have we seen a linebacker who led his team or led the state in tackles, and he goes to college and he's not as good as we thought he was? Well, I would be taking a hard look at that nose tackle or that defensive tackle in front of him who's feeding him all those tackles. Maybe take both of them. That's something that you learn about when you look at linebackers and stats. Gary, you're on this Thursday morning panel. As always, thank you for joining us. Sports Director, WVUA, Channel 23 in Tuscaloosa. Also does a great show right after this, Tide 100.9 in Tuscaloosa and Tider Insider TV. Catch it Tuesday nights at 6:30 with our good friend Rodney Orr of Tider Insider. And having a discussion on college sports, looked at the top 25, Gary, from all over the country. There's a lot of teams on there right now, but, a lot of familiar names as well. So what's happening at Alabama and any breaking stories that we're not talking about? Tell us all.
Well, the big story that broke last night is that, Nick Saban, reportedly, according to The Athletic, being asked to be the, co-chairman of this, committee, presidential committee to look into NIL and all the things going on in college athletics. Exactly what that is going to be, we don't really know at this point, but it's certainly interesting. If, we've talked about a commissioner for college sports or college football. Who knows? Maybe this is a step in that direction for Nick Saban. I can't imagine that he would ever do anything like that full time. But as I said, I don't really know much about it right now, other than what I read. I read the the story on The Athletic, which just basically said that he's going to be in that role along with, I think, a businessman who's a booster for Texas Tech. Maybe you guys might have already talked about that. But so that's, that broke last night. As far as sports here, it's the spring season. Softball got knocked out of the SEC tournament last night by South Carolina, so they'll wait till Sunday to see if they host a regional or if they have to travel. Certainly, if they're top 16 seed, hosting's big for them. I think the fact that they average so many fans, over 3,000 a game, could factor into that, even though, the record maybe isn't as great as they would like it to be. Baseball hosts Georgia this weekend, the next to last SEC series. They're trying to get in position to host the regional as well. Yeah. Certainly that loss last Sunday night in Nashville to Vanderbilt was a heartbreaker. You're up 7-2 with 2 outs to go in the 8th inning, and you wind up losing, which sounds like an NBA playoff game, letting it get away. But and then outside of that, football is if there is a down period. Coach DeBoer was in Mobile earlier this week for the Senior Bowl Hall of Fame and golf tournament. He spoke to the Hoover Mayor's prayer breakfast earlier this week, so we've heard from him a couple times. He seems like he's in a good place, feels good about the roster. They retained so many of their players, which either tells you that either that's a good thing because they move in their players and the players are bought in, or if you get into the season and you're losing games, people will say, well, why didn't you hit the spring portal more? Yeah. So, but right now, all's running pretty smooth.
Interesting thing. It seems like Alabama, when Coach Saban left last year, that's normal. You're going to have a lot of players, 31, I think, left. But when Jeremy Pruitt was relieved of his duties at Tennessee, the number 44 comes to mind. 38 players hit the portal, 2 were medically retired, and 4 were released from their national letter of intent. So as far as keeping players this year that Alabama wanted to keep, did they lose anybody? Like last year, Caleb Downs left, and we know about other guys that left, but again, you had a coaching change.
Yeah, I'd say this year, for the most part, no, they've retained their roster. Lost some guys to the draft, obviously, and but as far as looking back to December, I can't think of anybody that was just a bombshell. Oh my gosh, you can't, like a Caleb Downs, or Julian Sand or something like that. And then in the spring, like I said, they didn't lose a single scholarship player. Now the flip side, as I alluded to, is that limited their portal. You don't have roster spots available, so you can't dip into the portal. There were a lot of defensive linemen available that other schools scooped up, and Alabama didn't manage to sign 2 tight ends, one from West Virginia and one from Troy, which is an area of need for them. But as we've discussed on this show, and I'm not, I don't want people to get the wrong idea. Alabama's not in the poorhouse. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I do think in terms of total NIL, they're not spending what some other schools in this conference are spending on football or men's basketball or other sports. I think that there are other schools that are spending a lot more. And so when you're trying to stay on a budget, and I saw Greg Byrne last Friday at the Mount Moore Memorial Golf Tournament, we didn't talk about this, but I do think that he is a budget-minded AD. I think that he believes, kind of like we balance our checkbook, Rob, old school people, like, you don't spend more than you have. And I think that, and when you do commit to NIL money, you darn sure make sure you're in a position to follow through and pay those athletes. We've already seen some instances where promises are made and then the student athletes get to the school and the money's not available for them. So I think he runs a pretty tight ship, and I say that as a compliment. And but I think that Alabama is not just, it's not just money being thrown everywhere after players. And in fact, basketball, they're a couple under the roster limits. And if it goes to 15, they'll be even more under. But I do think that one thing they're doing, Coach Oates said this week in Mobile that he expects LeBaron Feiline to stay in the draft. But if he did pull out of the draft, I think they've held some money back for him so that they would have it, because they would love to have him back. If LeBaron Feiline came back, that changes everything for Alabama basketball. I think he's that good.
Here's what I wonder, and everybody on this panel can lend weight to this. How many schools are taking their alumni and supporters that are highly successful men and women in the business world and having them, maybe these student athletes, spend a weekend when they're 18 or 19 at their lake house or down on 30A and say, son, I was in college. I was setting up bowling pins at the bowling alley and doing an Uber driver at Archibald's Barbecue in Tuscaloosa. And I was cleaning the bathrooms at, the Rib Shack and say, but I stuck it out and I graduated and I had to pay back student loans. And now I've got a business worth $500 million. Now you can leave for $500,000 and go to that other school, but you better pray to God that it works out, because you can never come back home to the state of Alabama and be part of this network like the Bryant Scholars. You know what that is? That's real NIL. So I'm just curious. I mean, Matt, you talked about in Memphis. I'll never forget when we did a project, public finance for your refectory and the new cafeteria. It's a $32 million bond deal back in 2011 in March. We went and met with your controller, Boone, your chancellor Trout, your president. And man, I mean, they knew where every penny was going, but they had 38 students at Rhodes apply to medical school that year. You know how many of them got accepted? 38. There's guys in Tuscaloosa, and you know who I'm talking about, Gary. I'd be sitting them down with those guys and saying, hey, you stay here. I know who you are. I know where you are. Just give me your cell phone number and we'll build a relationship. And I'm not going to name names, but I know some people in Tuscaloosa that extremely successful. If I'm the Alabama coach, I'm going, hey, could you come talk to our players? That's how you're going to start keeping these guys there. And that $200,000 will seem like pocket change in the long run. Am I on to something, or am I just, again?
Well, I certainly think that. And now, again, if they're using local business people, I don't know, but I do know that they have finance seminars, business competency seminars with the players, the student athletes at this school all the time. I'll say all the time. They have them. They have people come in. Again, whether they're local, who they are, I don't know. I don't know if they're national business consultants or finance people like you, Rob, and all. But I do know that financial literacy is something that they do work with the student athletes on. I think that's a great idea if they're not doing it, like you said, people that have actually lived it, that came through the college system and built a business and so that might be something that they need to look to do. But I do think that they educate the student athletes here regularly, as I think most of these universities probably do, and I'll let the other guys speak to that. Yeah. But I do know that they work with them on that all the time, just like they do with the nutrition and the sleep and everything else. That's one thing about these schools now. If you're a student athlete, you have access to just about anything. Yeah. If you have an issue in your life, they will provide someone to help you with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned sleep. We one time had Dr. Gary Moss, the sleep doctor, come when I was working at Regents Morgan Keegan. And
I need to visit with him.
And it was a really good. He came and spoke to us for an hour. He made $13,000 for a 1 hour speech. My wife asked me, how was the speech? I said, I don't remember. I fell asleep. But it was good. But go ahead and answer that question. I wasn't drinking coffee from the magic cup. Yeah, but along the line of what we just said, I want to hear that.
To see you. We do the financial literacy things. We, all of those things. I think most folks are doing that to some degree. The challenge, and I think conceptually, Rob, what you say is good, and we've done that as well to match up some of our student athletes with some successful business folks, many of whom were former student athletes.
Yeah.
But giving them access and having them attend events like that versus them really soaking it in, especially when you're looking at your higher dollar kids, because, all of us were 18 at one time. All of us, if you were a successful high school athlete and went on to college, we all thought we were going pro. And so at 18, 19 years old, and that was when, if you were fortunate, you just had a scholarship. Today's world, you have a scholarship and you may have $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in a bank account. So getting a lot of the, and I'm not saying all of them, but getting those young men and women who have that kind of money in NIL to give them a dose of reality that they will comprehend and act upon. It is a challenge, but we continue to try to do that. And we've got to do that.
Yeah. Matt.
Yeah, at our level, we do a lot of guest coach things. So what we'll do in a weekend is we may bring back, if we have a big football game, a successful alum that will go to practice on Friday on the walkthrough, maybe be a part of pregame speech, talk to the team afterwards, and it really resonates. And on the basketball side, I would do that as well with some of my successful alumni. A lot of times we did it around a homecoming activity, right? Sometimes it was a Hall of Fame situation. If one of my former players was getting inducted, we were going to bring them back for practice, and they can talk about their experience. And at Rhodes, it's unique because we have some really successful alumni in terms of what they're doing now, as you know, Rob, because you get the Memphis area thing. I also want to say one thing about this whole conversation. You mentioned Caleb Downs. Boy, I'm going to tell you this. I can't prove this 100%, but boy, Caleb Downs made Ryan Day a better football coach. And I'm going to tell you something. So did the running back Judkins from Ole Miss. Yeah. And people with resources that match up with really good coaching acumen. And I think one of the best things Ohio State did recently, though he's no longer there, that Chip Kelly helped Ryan Day. There's a mentorship there. Ryan Day played for Chip Kelly back in the day. It just was a perfect match because after the Michigan game, we all could agree they were a little turmoil, at least from the outside. But inside, they maintained it. And I've watched Caleb Downs live. I've watched him on TV many times. He's going to be a top, 3 or 5 draft choice whenever he comes out. He's that good. And I just wonder, Gary, if I were a Bama fan, and I'm sure we all know everybody has resources, but my gosh, you give someone like Nick Saban those type of resources, and honestly, Nick did a lot of this before the NIL era, okay? He's the greatest of all time, in my opinion, to coach the sport of college football. I know that's probably easy to say, but there's some great ones. But I just think some of these guys that get all this money, you still have to manage resources and staff and make good decisions on players. And I thought Coach Saban did that for years. And I'm not saying there wasn't a good financial offer for Caleb to keep him in Alabama, but when Nick's kind of like your position coach, that matters. And I'm just telling you, when you lose a couple key guys, you've seen a shift right now. Ohio State's on fire, guys, with recruiting and everything. I'm not sure they're going to repeat because I think it's really tough these days to do it. But, man, if you give the right coach the right resources these days, look what Texas has done with Sark. I mean, honestly, they're knocking on the door of a national championship as well. Now they're going to have Arch Manning in there. It's really interesting these days because back in the old school days when I started in coaching, it was more about player development. Well, now you got the equivalent of NFL free agency every year in the college level. And if I see you, Rob, and you're talented, and I watch you on tape, my job is, well, let me see if I can get Rob in the portal. And that's the way it is, guys. Yeah. And like Gary says, all this eligibility craziness, that's the first piece I would try to fix. Okay, maybe we up it from 4 to 5, but you're getting no more than 5, and we'll make sure you get a graduate degree too if you do your part. I mean, we got to figure this stuff out because these 6, 7, 8-year deals, guys, that's not college athletics.
Yeah.
One word on Caleb Downs, or a couple of words, I agree with Matt wholeheartedly. And it's like in the recruiting process before we had NIL and portal, you get a guy, not only is he playing for you, he's not playing for somebody else that you play against. It's a double whammy. And the portal now provides that. Not only did Alabama lose Caleb Downs, but they lost him to Ohio State. And there's no doubt in my mind what Matt said is the truth. He and others that they've been able to go in the portal and get as good as they recruit, but still they complemented that roster in the portal. And if Alabama has Caleb Downs last year, maybe they win another game or two and they're in the playoff. He's that good. I think he's the best football player in the country. I think he's a Heisman Trophy candidate. I watched him up close here. And you're right. He came to Alabama because of Nick Saban. Specifically, I mean, there was a feeling for a long time he would go to Georgia, but he wanted to play for Nick Saban so that when Nick Saban left, regardless of what Alabama tried to do, they wanted to move on. But he is a phenomenal football player, and I agree too on what Ohio State's doing with the way they recruit, and now with the way they're using the portal, and they're able to dip into the SEC and get some of the best players in the SEC. They're going to be hard to handle.
Blind Squirrel Sports. I'm going to say he's from Buena Vista, Georgia. That's not too far from Columbus. Gary, we saw your Crimson Tide defeat my Dogs yet again last year, and which was one of the most exciting games if you're just, Floyd R. Turbo American living out in Kansas somewhere and you don't care. But it was pretty wild. But he said, once again, you got my dogs. Does Alabama seem to just have Georgia's number? Well, in the last 10 matchups between Alabama and Georgia, it's Alabama 9, Georgia 1. But in the last 5 years, look at these records. Georgia 61-7, Alabama 58-10, Texas 45-20. Alabama leads the nation with the most guys, close to 70 guys on active NFL rosters. But that's a pretty powerful statement. 9-1 in the last 10 games against Georgia.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think the difference now is that Nick Saban's not the coach.
That's right.
And people are waiting to see if Kalen DeBoer can maintain this. And last year, there's no panic, but that was a disappointment. I said going into the season, Alabama should, if you're in the 14 playoff most years and you were in the BCS championship game a lot when there were just 2, you should be in a 12-team playoff. They did not make it. So, I don't think it's a hot seat deal or anything like that. I think that term's overused, but I think Alabama, if they're not in the playoff this year, then it's going to be ramped up even more next year because of all the things that you're talking about. And they had 2 first-round draft picks this year. Both those guys were signed by Nick Saban. Jalen Milroe was, drafted by the Seahawks. He was signed by Nick Saban. So it's now in the transition to see if Kalen DeBoer can continue to coach and recruit and keep this program at the level that Nick Saban had. Hey, what time is it, guys?
8:57.
I got to go.
Thank you, Gary.
Across the hall. All right, bye.
Hey,
thanks, y'all.
I'm going to throw a hypothetical out here at y'all. The way we talk about the hot seat and the portal with all the coaches and the athletes. How about if you're at your company, they put the monthly sales production, like the top, you have 40 guys on the sales staff, and they put it out there and they rank it like, you're number 28. Hey, Matt, you're on the hot seat. You going to enter the job portal? I mean, think about it. If we were all which we are, we all know we are, or we do it to ourselves. Everybody is potentially on the hot seat. But I think Matt, you're right, matching up the resources. And John, brilliant point. I'm just going to say, if I'm the athletic director of you pick the school, I'm going to come out and say, hey, what would really help us with NIL is, and y'all know how to get a hold of me. Here's my email. I'm the athletic director, wherever. Reach out to me. I want to start partnering you up with our student athletes. John, you got some guy who's got part of that natural gas tranche down there around Shreveport and Bossier City, or all these different places. There's a giant underground natural gas tranche. You get some petroleum engineer. You get a student athlete who's majoring in engineering or just general business. Basically, most people don't really use their majors for their job. Start pairing up your supporters and boosters with your student athletes. I think they'll start going, wait a minute. So I can come out here. You're going to let me come out here to your lake house for a week with my family. Start doing stuff like that, man. And in Memphis, trust me, that Rhodes group of ring knockers is a powerful group of people. And I mean, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss in the securities business in Memphis. If you're in the bond business, financial services, good grief. They got the number 3 ranked accounting school in the country. You look at Georgia, look at Florida. That's what I tell people about the Gators. That's becoming a public ivy. Okay? They need to start letting more in-state residents into the University of Florida. But I'm telling you, you heard President Trump's speech at Alabama the other day. He said the next generation of leaders in this country, they're not all going to come from Harvard and Yale and Princeton. They're going to come from Alabama and schools in the South and all around the country. Man, if I'm the athletic director, I'm calling up my people and saying, help me, rather than just giving them a check, which is short term. Brick and mortar and relationships last forever. Real quick comments, and I'll let y'all go.
Yeah, they do, Rob. But again, I think that's common sense, and I think that's what the 3 of us would do, and we would steer our kids to do.
I forgot.
but a wad of money, especially to a kid or a family who has not had it, $200,000, $300,000 seems like millions, and it's all about the perspective. But we've got to continue to educate our kids. NIL is not going away.
Yeah,
I am hopeful that there's some type of guardrails put up. Hey, let me go back to one other thing real quick, and I got to run. And I appreciate Gary for bringing this up. He talked a little bit about softball and Alabama softball. I would encourage folks. I know we talk mostly about football and men's basketball. Hey, if you hadn't been to a college softball game lately, go out and see it. There's a reason why softball is increasing in popularity. It's a pretty quick game. There's some great athletes. I was hoping Gary was still going to be on here. Our softball coach, who just got named Softball Coach of the Year in the Sun Belt Conference, tied for third. Molly Finkner, she was actually a catcher at the University of Alabama for Coach Pat Murphy in, I think, 2012 and 13, and then was a graduate assistant there. Our team's actually playing today in the Sun Belt Tourney down in T-Roy, Alabama, playing this evening. So, again, a plug there for softball that we don't talk about a whole lot, but great athletes and fast-paced action.
Well, let me tell you what. Tuesday night, I get to be on the Lowdown with Lauren Meadows on this channel. Had the mother of one of the Florida softball players on, Kendra Falby. What an impressive lady, the mom. You can see why her daughter, who's a senior at Florida, that was so special to get to talk to her. And I told her, you've done a phenomenal job as a parent, because look at her daughter. And she goes, and Lauren asked, did y'all grow up Gators? And she goes, no. She goes, my husband and I are Seminoles, but they're Gators now. But they talked about the parents' involvement, and that was really cool. I know, John, you got to go, but ULM, Warhawks, go Warhawks. Love having, this is great insight. And anyway, look forward to having you next week. Let them know how they can follow you, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, anything and everything. ULM Sports is ulmwarhawks.com. John_Hartwell for X. And guys, as always, it's a pleasure to spend this hour with you guys, and a lot more knowledge than people a lot smarter than me on the show, but I appreciate the opportunity to visit with y'all, and have a great week.
It's like Robert Schuttle, the hour of power.
Take care, John.
Thank you, man.
See you guys.
All right. And Matt, look, unbelievable stuff. And let them know how they can follow you, and I'll let you go, and we'll do it again next week.
At Dino Hoops 44 on X. And as always, if you go to www.rhodes.edu, you can go to our athletic website and follow the links. We just hosted a men's lacrosse NCAA playoff game yesterday. We won 18-13. So our team is traveling tomorrow to Boston to play the number 1 ranked Tufts University in men's lacrosse. So I just want to give that shout out to our men's lacrosse team.
A great PR thing for Rhodes at the Memphis Zoo, which I'm a member of. They have a Caracal Lynx there in cat country. Y'all need to adopt him and say, this maintained by Rhodes College Lynx cat. Just planting a little seed there, okay?
I'll get a memo out to the president. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you so much. All right, let me say something about Landers Ford, people. Don Kitchens, the unbelievable Kent Ritchie, Brad Bellamy, the general manager, great staff committed to doing everything they can to help you get in a car, truck, or SUV, new or pre-owned. Huge lot, giant inventory. Poplar and Houston Levy, where Memphis and Collierville come together. Open every day of the week except Sunday, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. Again, you hear about tariffs and all this stuff on TV. They're going to work with you. They've got a job to put you behind the wheel with a payment that you can handle. Love these people. The experience out there, it's awesome. They have 85 people on the staff out there. Again, open 7 a.m., 7 p.m., and they've got the Ford Promise, the Power Promise. A couple of things. The 25 Expeditions are in, and they've got a big selection of the Broncos out there. If you're looking for a Raptor, call ahead, ask for Brad Bellamy, the Ford Raptors. Let them know that you're looking for a new car. You heard about it on Sidelines. They'll take off $500. Right down the street from Hewlett and Dunn Boot and Clothing Company, on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. We're going to have a little get-together tonight, 6 o'clock p.m. If you want to come by and talk some college football, hang out for a little while, and getting ready for the Touchdown Club May 19th. We've got the spring speaker series. We'll talk about that in the morning. But most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. Mother Teresa's right. We can all do something. We don't all have to do everything. So go out and help people today, make a positive difference. For executive producer Brenda